introduction first to architect in Manchester. Well, we talk about architecting and architecture, except that the main thing we find is we don't actually understand what being an architect is and what architecture is. And every time we have a debate, what the hell is our jobs? And we find that everybody's got a different view of what we actually do here. So, Architect in Manchester normally, or historically, has been a roundtable discussion group. I just want to pull out, thanks Joe for organising this, and Simon here for being the original instigator for the work. We normally have, as I said, it's a talking house, and we gather together with a number of facilitators, and we pick a topic and we work through it. So I'm really keen to continue that. This is a typical one in this space that we've had, but we've had quite a few other ones. I'm not that interested in, I'm going to guide the topic, I've got lots of slides, but I want this to be interactive. If you disagree, or if you've got a point to make on any of the things that I'm saying on the way through, feel free to heckle or to make comments on it or engage in a discussion. So we say Q&A, but it's going to be a discussion at the end, not questions. So firstly, who am I? I'm a senior consultant at Infinity Works, part of Accenture. My first development job was in 1982, but that doesn't mean I've had 40 years of experience. I kind of strayed from the path for a long while. But what I've tended to do over time is startups. And in startups, everybody's got to do everything. And there's a big conversation that happens between the people in the business side and the people in the IT side. And when I say IT, I do mean software development as well as that. In that they often don't understand each other. 3.5 years ago, I came into Infinity Works as a consultant. The company's been going 7 years. Manchester was formed by Dave Postel over there, so we've got a few celebrities around the place. 5.5 years ago, and we have grown to large numbers. 700 over 7 years is very impressive for growth. 2 years ago, we were taken over by Accenture, but we've very much stayed our own thing. So, the big problem I see with IT leaders and with business people is we speak a different language. IT in the business is the phrasing that gets used by a couple of authors, including Mark Schwartz, and it's phrased in such a way as they are two different entities and they really don't talk to each other. You look at this survey here, the business regard IT as a service provider and a badly behaving service provider, in that why don't you actually hit your deadline? Why don't you actually come in under cost? Why is it so complicated? The conversation is that they're errant children in software development, and the IT leaders, including the architects, are to keep them in line and keep them moving forward and that kind of thing. So the two aspects of that, two people that I have a lot of time with and for reading, etc. Mary Pompendick talks about IT as a cost centre, and as such they're judged not by what they produce, not by what they build as products, but simply did they hit their performance metrics? Why have you overspent? Is the typical problem. And then you get not only, it's hard to visualize what IT does, but the whole goal of a good software system is we're hiding the complexity. The people that are using it shouldn't know that it's complex behind the scenes. And we're doing ourselves a disservice on marketing because we're not showing how complex, how clever we're being. That's not a bad thing. Sorry, I'm just trying to remember my next slide. So, how do we bridge that gap? How do we become part of the conversation in business, particularly as architects? The phrase I like is, how do we get a seat at the table to be part of the business, to be part of the conversation, particularly in sales? I think that here's my thesis, that there are 5 different ways that we can do it that I can think of, and those are the ones because I have experienced them personally. And I think a lot of people will have seen and experienced those, and I want people to talk about those as we go along. So, the first example, and this one's a bit of a cheat. You have to get your architecture right because what you're actually delivering is integrating into other people's systems in an app market. Now, there's more than that. Those are the things those are the ones that I can see immediately. They're fairly easy to be in part of the discussion because chances are the whole firm, the whole business was built around we're delivering an app into an app marketplace. So it's a bit of a cheat. All right. Easily done, easy part of the conversation. The next one, which is more interesting, is actually being the provider of that platform. So WordPress is a great example of that. Highly successful business in itself, but highly successful as a platform. 43% of all websites on the internet run on WordPress. 65% that use a content management system rather than something more complicated are also run on WordPress. I'd just like to point out one of the co-founders, Mike Little, actually is a local guy. He lives in Stockport and he turns up to meetups around the place, in particular Code Up Stockport, where he used to go in there and teach beginners how to get plugins and how to configure their WordPress. So, wonderful guy. Go and shake his hand and congratulations. I was kind of hoping there was a chance he would actually turn up here. So, Manchester is a great community for this kind of thing, and you'll be surprised who hangs around. The curious thing from a business point of view, is the relationship between people that provide the platform and people that provide the plugins. And that is that if you provide the platform, you have a very powerful position in the market. As architects, we should be driving the business to drive towards being the differentiator, being the platform, because then we get to control the price of the tooling or of what we sell. As long as the market can bear it, we have complete control. Nobody else is going to assert us from it without building the complete platform itself. Where if you are a plugin provider, then you are competing. You are a commodity into the ecosystem, and you have to accept that the differentiator you will have is selling cheaper. Now, this will apply in a lot of markets, not just this one. This shouldn't be any news to you? Is everybody kind of okay with that? Nobody really disagreeing? Can you see the architect's role in this, and that what we have to do is make sure that everything fits together perfectly and seamlessly? It's a very easy thing. As the differentiator, how well you architect the product to be able to have other people integrate with you is vital. If you can't make it an easily and seamless journey, you can't do it. So already in this type, the business is already listening to you. Acero got 5 types. Of course, I'm a geek. I'm counting down, and I'm counting from 4, so can't avoid that one. This type is something I experienced very directly. It's a startup that I was senior technical architect for. It's a payment gateway. Sure, there's lots of payment gateways around the place. We've probably been involved in integrating this, in with them. Most of the big payment gateways these days have a feature backlog that will last years. If the industry wants a new feature into those, complicated ways of paying, like pay by email, pay by QR code, pay by chip on your wrist, they're really not interested because they've already built the product, and the VCs that own them are just interested in cashing out. So what Intrapay decided to do is build a system where they could very quickly build new features in, like they have a request and a month later that's available on their production platform for interesting ways to pay. There was a time for Blackburn where you could pay for anywhere in the football stadium with a chip on your wrist. So they were integrating with that, and fairly much the time between that being requested and that being available was 2 months. So the speed of integrating new solutions was a feature of the company. The architecture had to be fast enough to get that out. And the key you had to have was adaptability. Now, all right, to be honest, the company fell over, but that was for different reasons. There was a funding problem. Who here has read Crossing the Chasm by Geoffrey Moore? Just click hands up. 1. Oh dear. We've all heard of technology adoption curves. There's usually a big peak of excitement followed by a trough of despondency, followed by a view of reality setting in and it's actually useful. That's very much a technologist's view because they are looking to the gospel, etc. This is a different view. This is a view of how you do your sales for a new product, for a new technology. So we start from the left and we're working through, you have to go through each step going to the right in order to get each set of these sales. The innovators are technologists that go, oh, that looks exciting, I will go and play with that and I will build a product on top of that. Easy sell, no problem. The early adopters, very similar group, they're actually looking to see how well it fits in with their product, but they're willing to go and experiment and take the risks, etc. Not a problem, easy sell. Big scary chasm, hard to sell across because the early majority will only buy your product or your technology is if everybody else has brought the product and the technology. So how do you sell across that? You have to, well, it's impossible from the sound of things. So the way to sell across that is typically you bundle your product with somebody that has already crossed the chasm. You need to look around for people that have a similar aligned product and go, I've got some more features with you, I will try and, we can put it together, you're already across the chasm, bring me with you. And then the late majority, they will go, well, I guess if everybody else has got it, I'm going to have to get it. The laggards don't care about that, you're never selling to those guys. Those guys are probably still using fax machines. Best example I could come up with that, and there are many of them, is Skype. Skype, founded in 2003, beta fairly quickly, good product, 3% of the market share when acquired by eBay. Did anybody try and use eBay at that stage? Did anybody actually ever see the place where you could start a video call with the people bidding on you? The integration was terrible. Integration seems to come up again and again, but that's what architects do. Abandoned by eBay, sold off to venture capitalists who thought, well, there's a product here, we just need to sit on it along until the world is right. Purchased by Microsoft, and the usage went through the roof because it was bundled, because it was a standard part of Windows 8. Now, I didn't put the numbers for 2020 and the pandemic. It lost a marketing campaign. Everybody started to use Zoom as if it was video calls. It's like the Hoover for vacuum cleaner or Kleenex for tissues. It became the way people saw it, and therefore you had adopted it. My personal experience for a Type 1, as I've got it here, is another startup that I worked for and collapsed with almost no visibility. Delta Point sold pricing information to the leasing car industry. At the time, in 2005, let's say, probably knew more about car pricing than anybody in the UK. For a fleet of vehicles, they could predict the total price of a fleet of vehicles 3 years into the future within 2%. So you think, oh, the leasing car companies are going to like that because they lose all their money if they just get their pricing wrong when they come to sell the car. So, all over it. We had two different leasing companies who were really enthusiastic and thought there was an opportunity. Nobody else cared because nobody else was using it. Why would I want that if my competitors aren't using it? I've never heard this kind of thing. Acquired by Auto Trader in 2013. Anybody from Auto Trader here? Good, not going to embarrass myself. I talked with their data scientist coming out of that product a few years ago. He had no idea of half the features that we developed. He had no idea that we actually had a predictive model from there. And that's because when they sold it on, there was no ability to integrate. So how much money is the owner of Delta Point leaving on the table because they can't sell most of the product they've got? So from the business point of view, the architect is going, we can sell the product better. When we exit from the startup, when we get acquired, we've got a better story to sell to the people acquiring us. No disagreements, no informed consent discussion. Okay. My last one. This is what I'm actually working on right now. This is the automated pharmaceutical lab of the future. It has a large number of components in it, as you can see. I could probably walk you through some of it, but I think just the complexity of it. For the pharmaceutical companies, they are heavily regulated by the FDA. It takes 3 to 6 months for every component in here to be validated as fit for purpose and signed off from a legal point of view. Every time they lift a new version of one of these components, it has to be revalidated. And everything is lovingly hand configured to work with each other piece for that version. Can you imagine how hard it is to change one thing in this there? Several of the farmers have come to us at Essentia and very much ourselves at Infinity Works and saying, we don't know how to do it, help us out. We are selling an integration layer into here. We are actually, that layer there orchestration. But what we've done is expand the offering out so that we say, not only can we provide that component, we can help you integrate that component, and we are building in a enterprise service bus to allow that to talk to all the other components so that they can all be validated independently. So what we are selling here as a product that is owned by Essentia, it's not doing it as consultancy, is the ability to integrate with our system. Not only just selling the system, but integrating that system. So, what is the architect's place at the sales table? I believe that we need to actually make sure that what we sell is it fits with the architecture, and the architecture fits with what we're selling. It is an important component, but not only is the architecture a feature, it can be the most important feature we are selling in the product. That's probably I want people to disagree with that one. The other things we're doing, we are a IT leader in the business, and as a bonus for architecture, we are good at making good decisions under uncertainty. The way we do that is to make sure that we don't commit, that we have adaptability in anything we build. One of the problems we do have on the way through is we can actually overbuild that. So we need to build it so that it's a perfect fit for what we're selling, but we're not over-architecting the bits that we don't care about by the business. Things like actually having visible architecture decision records so that when we make a decision, it's a visible decision, everybody understands it, and everybody has input going, well, you're not considering this, you're not considering that, and inviting sales in and the business in so that they understand how we made that decision and what's important about that decision. We also need to expose things like RAID logs so that when we make an assumption, they can see what the assumption is and they can go, you're wrong there. So that's how, as architects, we need to deal with uncertainty. And lastly, as part of IT leadership, we are the stewards of important things, important assets within the company. The enterprise architecture is an asset itself, and we nurture that, and we need to make sure that it has quality, that it is not going backwards. The common phrase is technical debt, and we need to make sure that if the technical debt builds up, we can have the conversation with the sales to go, let's hold back a wee bit, we're getting ourselves in a bad place. As having a seat at the table for the business, we need to make sure that we can have those conversations and we can talk about the problems they've got in their terms. We also are the custodians of the people that work in IT. It's a bit of an interesting one there. If you don't have interesting work, or if you don't have habitable code, then people will disappear. I hate working on this code base. I hate working with this technology. I'm going to go somewhere else. They will disappear, and for a software organization, your IT people are your biggest asset. And the last one, which is possibly a more unique one for the recent times, the data asset with the data engineering architect. And my practice lead for data engineering isn't behind there, so I have to say that one. It's important. There is a phrase, data is the new gold, and the business will want to care about it, but it needs to be in a good form, and it needs to be secure, and it's all the entities around data as well. So, quick summary. The architect needs to understand how the architecture affects the sales. The architecture can be the unique selling proposition in the sale, and we need to understand the business, the platform, or the product, or the capability. and how does architecture support the business case? So I've been talking for way too long here. Firstly, a bit of light reading for you to take home. I will put this back up while we have a break. So, we're not doing QA, we're doing a discussion. Tell me I'm wrong. Simon.
So I'm going to say you're on the one thing.
Yeah.
At the start you talked about IT and the business, and that's a common thing, right? And you got me thinking, I wonder whether marketing refer to everyone outside of marketing as the business. I don't think they do. I think it's unique to IT. I wonder why that is. One of my assumptions or one of my thoughts is possibly due to the language we use. We use a very different language to other people.
Yeah.
So there's quite a barrier, and you alluded to this, right? But then towards the end, you talked about ADRs and RAID logs and exposing those to the business. I don't think they're the appropriate ways to communicate with the business. They're very useful, but they're not for that audience.
Yeah, yeah. So I think you're right. I think that the fact that they exist is probably the more important thing. I think you need to expose them. I think you need to talk the business through what they are. There's an education that needs to go on both directions. I think the software adoption curve is is part of the conversation where we need to understand what they're going through, etc. And I think they need to. I think part of having a seat at the table is being part of the conversation. And the actual phrase that I like that comes from Martin Schwartz is the best way to have a seat at the table is just to be at the table, just to have the conversations, just to engage in the conversation. Now, I must admit this is a cheat because it's the title of his book there. He is actually writing from a CTO point of view, where I'm trying to take this from a architect point of view. So, yes, there is a language barrier in both directions, and we both need to learn it, and I think you're right there. Yeah, I actually put that badly. Yeah.
I think it's one of the key skills that senior technical leaders need to bridge, right? It's how do we communicate those things to the audience?
Cool. Anybody else? Yeah.
Can you jump to the slide around kind of time to market? I think it's like Tait 2, was it like the payment firm that introduced features? Yes.
Yes.
This is not a contradiction to that, by the way, but
I don't mind if you do.
is there a point that we have to be aware of in architecture or at the table of diminishing returns of being faster, such that if we get, so to give you an example, if we get really good at answering emails, what we will do is get more emails. Is there a point at which we have to be aware of that? If we get faster at delivering features, do people expect faster? Now that's going to sound such like I'm a contractor that expands my project, but yeah.
Okay, well, I'll vamp for time. Has anybody else got an answer to that? Any thoughts? So too many emails is a bad thing, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so it's probably because I've read 4,000 weeks, but it kind of plays out that scenario if we say employ a productivity technique of getting good at answering emails, inbox zero kind of thing.
Yeah.
What we do is create a scenario that means we'll receive more emails. So if we're setting a scenario where faster features is a good thing, and we're known for being fast, potentially will the organisation then expect us to be fast?
So you've got to start with the end in mind. You've got to start with why. For somebody else, Daniel Pink? Simon Sinek, yeah. You've got to actually get good at the things that matter. You've got to work out, this is why we're doing things, this is our end goal, these are the outcomes we want, and what are the things we need to get good at in order to produce those outcomes. Now what they're looking for was every transaction they're taking a small cut, as opposed to the price of the feature, etc. So what they're also looking for is every time they create a feature, they sell it to all their customers. So they're repeating the sale, and the actual key they're looking for as well is because the market differentiator they had was all these new features that nobody else has, then they can drive the volume through everybody adopting that. So the volume, the number of emails they're getting, is actually what they're looking for. So you're thinking the emails that they're getting, the sheer volume of emails they're getting is a bad thing, but that's because you're thinking that that's the outcome they don't want. Drive what you want from the outcome, and that's a business thing as well. That's a start with why. What is the outcome you're looking to do? Now, quite often also they would pivot. This company actually pivoted away from that before they ended up in a bad place. They ended up finding that they could provide a platform into China for people to pay through non-official means through the payment gateway platform they've got. And funny enough, only the Chinese elite would actually have access to it. So it was a bit of a dodge there, but that was the pivot that they went for.
I think I was thinking that concern of if I'm at the table as an architect because we're known for delivering features quick, there's a persistence in that to try and keep that standard up, if that's the reason you're at the table.
I see that as a success, don't you?
The fundamentals of this business was around being able to deliver their features quickly, is my understanding. Is that by providing these features quickly, they were able to grow market share, or that was the intention of the business. So, I think the email analogy works when you talk about the cost of the interactions with the emails and say whether those emails could be avoided by having better help guides, chatbots, that type of thing, which reduces the number of emails. Everything ends up getting funneled because it's easy just to email them, sort of thing. Just drop them an email, they'll get back to you really quick, sort of thing. That's the mentality. I think that you sort of, maybe the analogy is not the right analogy in this case. Whereas if your business is going to make money from every single email you're going to get, that's slightly different.
I think the concept of IT within business is quite often, we ask an awful lot from them and they never deliver because it takes them 2 months to deliver. And by the time it gets that far, we take your money. Whereas that concept of quick delivery means they've got it now, and if they change their mind, got it again, and they feel that they're getting the benefit. So that's deep in the agile mindset, isn't it?
Yes.
Got one slight disagreement with the faster features. It would be that it should be a quality feature as well. You say that quick iteration is good, but I think discovery of what people want is most important. And I'll just compare two companies. Cloudflare, they've got my business for like a long time. GitLab done. GitLab's apparently this great tech company and they push out these features and they're half-assed. But Cloudflare might take an extra week, but the quality generally is a little bit better. Not fully featured, just better.
So the interesting thing with the quality of here is that it's a heavily regulated environment as well, which meant that not only did we have to get good at the new payment method, but we had to get good at getting sign-off from regulation that the new payment method was very good. So the biggest success we actually had in Indonesia, where the basically every transaction is a weird form of electronic transaction and cash basically disappears. To such a degree that within the platform itself, people used to store a lot of money because that's the better place to store it rather than in banks, which really distorted the whole landscape. But what I'm alluding to there is we had to have quality features simply because we would get completely buried if we didn't.
I think one interesting thing in this as well is where IT is separate from the business, because in some ways you lead where the business goes. And so I had a meeting today. I work for Victorian Plumbing. They want to move into some different market areas, want to put a different menu on the website. It's interesting discussion because they haven't really thought about what the implications of this complete change of the user experience would be commercially. And when I asked them, like, so what do you want to do when somebody lands on a PDP page, product detail page, for example? They went, have you seen the guy's drawings? We want the menu. And I was, well, okay, so let's think about what that product type is, what the user journey is from there. And I think one of the difficulties that I find with IT versus the business can often be, can we sit down and think this more deeply than some guy drew a menu, please? I don't know if that adds to the discussion, but I don't feel like it's a thing that's been covered in these types.
So when you go to the original concept of a user story or a story that ended up becoming the concept that God forbid Jira uses, etc. Does anybody know the original definition of that?
Of a user story?
Of a story or a user story?
No, I'm not sure.
It's a promise for further conversation, and that's all it is. Yeah. And that's where you've got there is it's not a bad thing that you've actually had to sit down there. Possibly the problem is that they developed the story too far, and the other way to engage with the business, and this is an architecture thing, this is almost an agile development thing, is to engage in the conversation at an appropriate point, and quite often before they get ahead of themselves. And in order to be that, you have to be part of the conversation that early.
Yeah, I think that is one of the things that we're kind of missing, is that point of sometimes they want to, we're a relatively new department, like only a few years old, so they're kind of used to just chuck it over the fence.
Yeah.
and now we're at the point now where we need greater integration. But I do feel like one of the things that you sometimes find, and other people find is that businesses can be quite reactive and throw up an idea. And sometimes it's about how do you get in on that conversation early enough to help shape the complexity.
Can I ask, I wonder if you started off saying that IT is considered quite an expensive and slow part of the business. I wonder if part of the problem is we're not involved early on because they think, well, let's develop it ourselves and make sure it's worth involving IT. Let's make sure it's worth pulling in the big guns, if you like, before we think it's even worth them getting that seat at the table.
Yeah. So there's a phrase for what actually develops there, and it's called shadow IT, where they know there's a cost involved into pushing it through to the bigger software development. So let's just go and play with it ourselves. And I think probably half of the odd Salesforce apps that get developed are by shadow IT because they feel like, oh, this platform, I can develop it myself. And God forbid, Appian, for those that know it, or any low-code, no-code interface, is the business going, don't need these guys, let's go and explore it ourselves. So that kind of... But having said that, it's not that they're slow, it's that they just don't, IT is seen as slow, it's that they are out of control. They don't understand it, it's a foreign beast. The reaction is to bring in an IT leader, a CTO or CIO, who will control them and just tell them to come in on the estimates. I know I've been in an interview where halfway through they said, here's Murray, he's going to be the development lead, he's going to keep those developers in line so we can get on with things.
So is it a trust issue then?
Oh, it's a trust issue. Now, you and I are consultants, that's what we do, we build trust so that we can move on. Anyone else?
The language on this, a lot of it's talking about IT, but actually it's really interesting. My experience is that of where I've worked previously, there's been a separation between tech and IT. IT is the infrastructure that has to be there for the business to operate. It's your email, it's the necessities of any modern business. whereas tech was what we were actively developing and the business was behind. So it was like a split. We looked after the IT, but also the tech was being developed as well. And there was definitely more engagement on the tech side, whereas the other bit was just make it happen.
Yeah, you caught me on a hand wave. I did kind of say when I got to this, I'm meaning software development as well.
Yeah.
But to be honest, it's more complicated than that. And that there are actually two groups in there. There's the support people that do magic to provide laptops and internet connections and that kind of thing, compared to the software development, what you were calling tech. That is very much a different thing. But they both have the same conversational problem. Yeah.
What happened in the case of the company that was acquired by AutoTrader? Because you said that a lot of the features were not used. Was that because there was a language barrier between the architects and the CEO, or was it an architecture decision?
I think they ended up buying it purely for the database, not functionality that was
Pardon?
on top of the database.
Okay.
Yeah. I possibly need to go back because it still exists within AutoTrader as a pricing function, and I need to go back and actually have that. I could ask that question at some stage
Okay.
next time I'm in there.